Chapter 3997. Go and die by yourselves. When Li Zhuangji heard Chen Bufan and the other swords, his face also revealed a look of joy. As long as he could complete the mission this time, he would become a successor disciple by the end of the year assessment. That would be a meteoric rise. The sky quickly darkened. Although Li Zhuangji and the others were arrogant, they still had basic common sense. Once the sky completely darkened and the sea was abnormally dangerous, they had to send someone to guard it. They looked at each other and naturally handed over the responsibility of the vigilance to Yun Chujiu and Zhao Hui. To their surprise, Yun Chujiu did not say anything. Instead, she obediently agreed. Li Zhuangji thought to himself, at least this stinky girl knows what's good for her. If she continues to be so tactful, it's not impossible to not kill her. When the time comes, it'll just teach her a lesson. Zhao Hui was also very puzzled by Yun Chujiu's easygoing attitude. After Zhao Hui and the others had fallen asleep, Zhao Hui asked in puzzlement, "Junior sister Yun, why are you so easygoing?" Yun Chujiu chuckled and said, "I'm usually easygoing too. Besides, there's still a long way to go. It's not a big deal to stay up all night." Zhao Hui really could not understand Yun Chujiu's thoughts, so he could only dutifully patrol the bow and stern of the ship. He was not as optimistic as Li Zhuangji and the others. He always felt that the sea of nothingness here was very dangerous. A night quickly passed, but nothing happened. Not even a single sea beast came to harass them. Yun Chujiu frowned. She looked for Li Zhuangji and said, "Let's return." Li Zhuangji was first stunned, then he said angrily, "Yun Chujiu, are you crazy? We haven't found the ambergris, why are we returning?" Yun Chujiu sneered, "Didn't you notice that something is wrong?" Li Zhuangzi's face became even uglier, "Something is wrong? What's wrong? Other than the bigger waves, we haven't met any sea beasts, and you still say that something is wrong?" Yun Chujiu's voice also became colder, "It's because we haven't met any sea beasts that something is wrong. We have been sailing for a day and a night. According to common sense, even if we don't encounter high-level sea beasts to provoke us, there should be some sea beasts that like to follow the ship, right? But did you see it? This. HMPH, you've never been to the Sea of Lost. How do you know if there are any sea beasts that like to follow ships? Perhaps there aren't any sea beasts like what you said. Don't say any more. I'm the team leader. Everything is up to me," Li Zhuangji said coldly. Yun Chujiu turned to look at Chen Bufan and the others. "What do you think?" Chen Bufan and the others looked at each other. Although they were a little scared by Yun Chujiu's words, they felt that she was making a mountain out of a molehill. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. Therefore, they kept mocking her. They were just echoing Li Zhuangzi's words. Yun Chujiu sneered and said, "All right, since you guys want to die, then go. Senior brother Zhao, let's go." Zhao Hui was dumbfounded. Although he felt that what Yun Chujiu said made sense, they did not have a ship, so how could they leave? Just as Zhao Hui was thinking, he saw Yun Chujiu call out a large ship. Although it was not as strong as Li Zhuangzi's ship, it was still strong enough to sail on the sea. Yun Chujiu jumped onto the ship, and Zhao Hui jumped onto Yun Chujiu's ship without hesitation. He now had 120% trust in Yun Chujiu, so he naturally followed her lead. Chapter 3998 contained a lot of ambergris. Li Zhuangji was so angry that he almost died. He never expected Yun Chujiu to bring a boat out. He shouted sternly, "Yun Chujiu, you have to think carefully. What you are doing now is running away at the last minute. You will definitely be punished when you return to the sect." Yun Chujiu laughed lightly, "It is better to be punished than to die. I hope you can still live to return to the sect." As Yun Chujiu spoke, she directly steered the ship to return, completely ignoring Li Zhuangzi's furious roar from behind. Chen Bufan braced himself and said, "Senior brother Li, 2 out of the 7 of us are missing. This mission is too difficult. Why don't we return as well? Anyway, if the sect asks, we can just push the blame onto Yun Chujiu." Li Zhuangji gritted his teeth. If it weren't for Elder Wan's promise, he would have been happy to return. But if he couldn't get the ambergris, wouldn't his position as a successor disciple be gone? And so, he said, don't worry about them. We'll arrive at the Blood Sand Island in half a day. We'll see how things go first. You must know that if we get the ambergris, not only will we be able to complete the sect's mission, we'll also make a lot of money. On one hand, Chen Bufan and the others did not want to offend Li Zhuangji. On the other hand, they were driven by greed. Therefore, they nodded and continued to sail in the direction of Blood Sand Island. As they got closer and closer to Blood Sand Island, the wind and waves became stronger and stronger. Fortunately, their ship was strong enough, so it was not a big deal. They could see the blood-red beach of Blood Sand Island from afar. Oh my God! Senior Brotherly, look! Those seem to be ambergris. Chen Bufan said excitedly as he pointed at some brown objects on the red beach. Li Zhuangji took a closer look and immediately revealed an ecstatic expression on his face. That's right, I've seen ambergris before. Those are indeed ambergris. Although the quality is average, there are so many of them. We're rich. The other three were also dancing with excitement. Ha, those two idiots, Yun Chujiu and Zhao Hui, actually gave up such a chance to strike it rich. What idiots! That's right. Not only did they miss the chance to strike it rich, they were even punished by the sect rules after returning to the sect. They really deserved it. The five of them were very excited. So when the big ship reached the shallow water area, they couldn't wait to rush to the beach. They didn't even put the big ship into their storage rings. Li Zhuangji rushed to the front of the largest ambergris, picked it up and said excitedly, ha ha ha. It's really ambergris. We're rich. Chen Bufan and the others were so excited that they couldn't even finish their words. They kept putting the ambergris into their storage rings, wishing they could put the entire Bloody Sand Island into their storage rings. However, while they were excited, they didn't notice that the ship that was originally docked in the shallow waters had sunk into the sea. Several scarlet eyes appeared on the surface of the sea, quickly approaching the beach. Li Zhuangji and the others finally noticed the abnormality, but when they looked up, they were scared out of their wits. They saw that the entire surface of the sea was covered by huge sea beasts. Pairs of scarlet eyes were greedily looking at them, and the ship that was docked in the shallow waters had long disappeared. Chen Bufan said with a trembling voice, yes, it's a level 64 bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark. What should we do? Li Zhuangzi's face was also pale, but he still pretended to be calm and said, what are you afraid of? They are sea beasts, they can't climb onto the island. Another disciple said with a sobbing tone, although they can't do anything to us for the time being, our ship has been destroyed by them. We can't go back. If we knew this would happen, we would have listened to Yun Chujiu. Chapter 3999, Red Roots. When Li Zhuangji heard the disciples' words, although his heart was filled with regret, he said, what's the point of saying all this? Do you still have any ships in your storage rings? The remaining 4 people shook their heads. In the northern continent, a good ship was more expensive than a flying spirit tool, and they rarely came to the sea. Moreover, when they were on a mission, the sect would assign ships for them to use, therefore, who would prepare another ship like that pervert Yun Chujiu? They wished they could turn back time now. If they had the chance to do it all over again, they would run away with Yun Chujiu no matter what. In their panic, even the ambergris on the beach lost its attraction. If they lost their lives, what was the use of these things? The bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark stared at them coldly in the sea not far away. They did not make any movements. When everyone was slightly relieved, they realized that as time passed, the tide began to rise. Chen Bufan said in panic, Senior Brotherly, the tide is rising. What should we do? Why don't we go to the island and take a look? Li Zhuangji gritted his teeth. The fishermen said that there were many terrifying sea beasts on the Blood Sand Island, but now they could only take a gamble. Therefore, he led Chen Bufan and the others away from the beach that had been continuously eroded by the sea water and into the low bushes. After walking for a while, nothing unusual happened. Li Zhuangzi's face regained some color. It seemed that the rumors could not be believed. There were no powerful demonic beasts on the Blood Sand Island. Chen Bufan said with a trembling voice, "Senior Brother Li, since it is still safe here, we should not continue to walk in." The other three nodded. Although there was nothing unusual at the moment, they recalled what Yun Chuzhou had said before. The Blood Sand Island was strangely quiet. It was not a short distance for them to go, but they did not encounter a single sea beast or even a single spirit ant. It was too unbelievable. Li Zhuangzi also lost his previous arrogance. Hearing that, he nodded. The five of them gathered some dry firewood, but when they were about to light the bonfire, they realized that they could not open their storage rings. This was not the worst part. They found that the spiritual power in their bodies had been completely confined. What was going on? After being stunned for a moment, the five of them looked at each other and ran wildly toward the beach. Even if they were facing those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, it was still much better than this kind of situation where they were at the mercy of others. However, blood-red roots suddenly jumped out from the ground, firmly entangling the five of them and dragging them toward the depths of the Blood Sand Island. The five of them struggled desperately, but all their struggles were futile. Fortunately, the roots did not strangle their necks, otherwise, the five of them would have died long ago. Despair surged in the five of them. They could not survive. One of the disciples cursed, "Li Zhuangzi, it's all your fault." Back then, Yun Chuzhou said that she wanted to return, but you did not agree. Now, we are all dead because of you. He was afraid of Li Zhuangzi before, but now that he was about to die, what was there to be afraid of? Li Zhuangzi was also very regretful in his heart, but what was the use of saying all this now? Could it be that he could do it all over again? After a quarter of an hour, the five of them were dragged to the center of the Blood Sand Island by the roots. When the five of them saw the situation around them, their faces showed fear and despair. Chapter 4000, The kindest woman in front of Li Zhuangzi and the others was a thick and strong tree. The blood-red trunk seemed to have been watered with fresh blood. What frightened them the most was that there were many white bones scattered under the tree. Some were human, some were sea beasts, and no one knew how many there were. The five of them knew that they could not escape death today, but they did not expect that they would actually be killed by such a demonic tree in the end. What made them even more terrified was that the demonic tree actually let out a strange laugh. Another 5 people are here to die. TSK, their spiritual power is not low. It's enough for this lord to replenish it. Li Zhuangzi roared with a stern expression, I advise you to let us go. Otherwise, once the sect finds out that we were killed, you won't be able to escape either. Blood Tree let out a hoarse and unpleasant strange laugh. Run? How could this lord be afraid of your so-called sect? Moreover, even if they came looking for me, they wouldn't find me. They would find out that this was just an ordinary island. Also, as long as I absorb some spiritual power, this lord will be able to escape the shackles of this island. When that time comes, who will be able to stop this lord? Although Li Zhuangzi and the others were somewhat confused after listening to Blood Tree's words, one thing was certain, they definitely had no hope of surviving today. The 5 of them struggled with all their might, but their bodies were tightly bound and they didn't have any spiritual power. There was no way for them to break free. The roots dragged the 5 of them to the Blood Tree's trunk. A crack appeared on the Blood Tree's trunk, emitting a thick smell of blood. Li Zhuangzi and the others felt that the shadow of death had already enveloped them. At this moment, a chuckle came from not far away. I say, you shameless demon tree, why are you so desperate? Aren't you afraid that after eating these 5 trash, you will also become a trash? Li Zhuangzi and the others were shocked to see 2 people standing not far away. They were Yun Chuzhou and Zhao Hui. Li Zhuangzi and the others were a little confused. Didn't Yun Chuzhou and Zhao Hui already return? How did they appear here? Could it be that they had hallucinations before they died? Li Zhuangji bit his tongue and grimaced in pain. It seemed that this was true. At this moment, he had long forgotten about his past grudges. To him, Yun Chujiu was the savior who had descended from the sky. The only person who could give them a chance to live. Junior sister Yun, why are you back? Save me. Save me. Li Zhuangji shouted at the top of his voice. Chen Bufan and the others were not any better. They were screaming at the top of their lungs. If they did not know, they would have thought that they had a good relationship with Yun Chujiu. Yun Chujiu sighed faintly. Senior brothers, I am the most soft-hearted person. I originally wanted to take senior brother Zhao and leave, but I couldn't just watch you guys die. So I risked my life and came here with full of enthusiasm. Aren't you all very touched? Li Zhuangji and the others were so touched that they cried bitterly. Although they felt that the possibility of Yun Chujiu successfully saving them was very small, they had to admit that they truly felt the warmth of humanity at this moment. They even secretly swore in their hearts that even if they couldn't live, they would do everything in their next life to repay junior sister Yun's kindness. In the past, they were simply blind. They actually felt that junior sister Yun was very annoying. Junior sister Yun was clearly the kindest and most soft-hearted woman in this world. Chapter 4001, The Foil Bucket. Zhao Hui, who was beside Yun Chujiu, looked at Li Zhuangji and the others' crying expressions. When he saw Yun Chujiu's sorrowful look, his heart felt like it had been bawled out. Junior sister Yun, is it really good for you to lie like this? We were clearly swept onto this island by a sudden storm. How is this what you mean by sacrificing yourself for others? Just as Zhao Hui was thinking, the blood tree interrupted his thoughts. The blood tree laughed strangely. What a heaven-sent opportunity. This lord originally thought that he would have to wait for some time before he could completely break free from this damn restriction. He did not expect that this lord would actually be given a great tonic, the heavenly thunder spirit root. Little girl, you really came at the right time. Yun Chujiu covered her stomach and laughed. It was so funny that Li Zhuangji and the others were dumbfounded. It was over. No wonder this little girl came to save them. She was crazy. Blood Tree was a little confused by the laughter. He said coldly, "What are you laughing at?" Yun Chujiu used her sleeve to wipe away the tears from her laughter. Of course I'm laughing at you. I've never seen someone so eager to die. Did I really come at the right time? Yes, I'm here to take your life. I advise you to just kill yourself. Look at your wretched appearance. You're neither human nor tree, you're simply ugly to death. Also, your voice is horrible to hear. What's the point of living? You still call yourself this lord, bah, shameless. The branches of the blood tree began to shake, and the roots immediately lashed towards Yun Chujiu and Zhao Hui, wanting to trap them as well. Yun Chujiu curled her lips. Senior brother Zhao, take out our treasure and show this ugly freak. Li Zhuangji and the others were surprised. Treasure? What treasure? Spiritual energy couldn't be used here, so where did Zhao Hui take out the treasure? Zhao Hui turned around and pulled out a cylindrical object from the grass. Seeing this, Li Zhuangji and the others were shocked. It was actually a foil bucket used to hold earth fire. Wasn't spiritual power not allowed here? How did junior sister Yun take out the foil bucket? Moreover, didn't she have to return the foil bucket to the bounty hall every time she completed a mission? Blood Tree obviously didn't recognize the foil bucket and continued to command its roots to sweep towards Yun Chujiu and Zhao Hui. However, it saw Yun Chujiu reveal a sinister smile and then use her hand to pull out the plug on the foil bucket. Instantly, wisps of extremely hot flames jumped out from the foil bucket. When Li Zhuangji and the others saw this, their faces revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. This was earth fire. Moreover, judging from the color of this flame, it should be the King Fire Essence Beast's earth fire. The 5 elements were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Wood was afraid of fire. This damned demonic tree was dead for sure. Their hearts surged with great joy. This kind of hope for survival made their entire bodies once again exude vitality. The earth fire sprayed onto the roots, and the blood tree immediately let out a miserable cry. This is earth fire. Stinky girl, where did you get it? Yun Chujo lifted the foil bucket and burned the roots with Zhao Hui as she said proudly, ugly freak, you really know your stuff. It's not a waste for my senior brother Zhao to carry this foil bucket through mountains and rivers. Come, let's make a deal. If you let those 5 trash go, I'll let you go. Well, cross the bridge and return to the road. Blood Tree said coldly, stupid girl, I'll count to 3. If you don't put down the thing in your hand right now, I'll kill these 5 trash. 1, 2, Yun Chujo bared her little white teeth. No need to count. Just kill them. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me whether they die or not. Li Zhuangji and the others, junior sister Yun, what happened to loving a family? What happened to not abandoning or giving up? What happened to the kindest and softest woman? Is it really okay for you to do this? Chapter 4002, Terms of Exchange. Blood Tree was also a little confused by Yun Chuji's words. Wasn't this wretched girl still righteous and self-sacrificing before? Why did she die now? Wasn't this change too fast? Blood Tree thought that Yun Chujo was holding on. It laughed strangely and said, wretched girl, don't think that you can deceive me with your words. I don't believe that you don't care about these people's lives. I'll give you one more chance. I'll count to 3, why are you so indecisive? I'll help you count. 1, 2, 3. Okay, you can kill them all. Yun Chujo continued to burn the roots of the blood tree with the earth fire as she said with a smile. Blood tree, it was really in a dilemma. These 5 trash were now its life-saving talismans. If it really ate them, this stupid girl would have no more scruples. What should it do? Blood Tree thought of something and sneered, alright, I agree with what you said before. I'll let these 5 people go. You guys leave immediately and pretend that nothing happened. Yun Chujo nodded, that's right. You let them go. I promise to take them away immediately. If I don't keep my word, I'll turn into an ugly monster like you. Blood Tree was so angry that he was twitching. He sneered and said, I don't believe you. Give me the bucket with the earth fire and I'll let them go. Yun Chujo blinked her eyes. If you don't believe me, I don't believe you. How about this? I'll put the stopper on. As long as the 5 trash come to my side, I'll give you this foil bucket. What do you think? Blood Tree sneered in its heart. It seemed that this stupid girl was just a little clever. As long as the foil bucket containing earth fire was controlled by it, none of these people would be able to escape. So, it said, okay. Immediately, Yun Chujo put the stopper back on the outlet of the foil bucket, and Blood Tree also let go of Li Zhuangji and the others. Li Zhuangji and the others staggered to Yun Chuji's side. Before they could say anything, they saw that the Blood Tree's roots had already taken the foil bucket away. Blood Tree laughed out loud. Stupid girl. You've been tricked. Do you really think that this lord has been blackmailed by you? This lord has merely played along. Without the earth fire, let's see what you can do this time. As Blood Tree spoke, he directed the roots to sweep towards Yun Chujo and the others. Li Zhuangji and the others were instantly dumbfounded. They had thought that they had been saved, but who would have thought that they had been tricked? It's over, it's over. Yun Chujo was too naive. Why did she really give the foil bucket to Blood Tree? At this moment, Yun Chujo took out a large kitchen knife from the bag on her back. With a series of cracking sounds, she chopped the tree roots into pieces. Blood Tree said incredulously, impossible, impossible. These roots of mine are extremely strong. Now that you don't have any spiritual power, how can you cut off my roots? Yun Chujo pouted at Zhao Hui and said with a smile, ugly monster, there are many things that you can't imagine. Just when Blood Tree was puzzled, he saw Zhao Hui pull out a foil bucket from the bushes. Yun Chujo said with a smile, "Ugly monster, no wonder people call you stupid. You are really an idiot. Do you think I only have that one foil bucket? Idiot." Chapter 4003, An Empty Bucket. Not to mention the Blood Tree, even Li Zhuangji and the others did not expect Yun Chujo to bring 2 foil buckets. Only Zhao Hui had a bitter smile on his face. Although these 2 foil buckets were not particularly heavy, without spiritual power, it also exhausted him. The Blood Tree immediately pulled its roots back a little, but it quickly sneered, "Stinky girl, do you think you are the only one who has earth fire? Don't forget, I also have a foil bucket in my hand. Although burning you to death will affect the absorption effect, it's still better than letting you escape." Li Zhuangji and the others immediately became nervous. Blood Tree was originally very difficult to deal with. If Blood Tree used earth fire to deal with them again, they would have no way to survive. Unexpectedly, when she heard Blood Tree's words, Yun Chujo giggled. "Ugly freak, why are you so stupid? Do you think that if there was earth fire in the foil barrel, I would hand it over to you? The earth fire inside has already been used up by me. What you got is just an empty foil barrel." Blood Tree used his roots to pull out the cork on the foil barrel in disbelief. Indeed, other than a few faint flames, there were no other flames jumping out from inside. Clearly, the inside was empty. Blood Tree was almost angered to death. After a long time, this wretched girl actually used an empty foil bucket to exchange for 5 hostages. It was simply a great humiliation. While Blood Tree was in a daze, Yun Chujo and the others turned around and ran. What a joke. If they didn't run, were they waiting to die? The earth fire in the foil bucket was limited. It was likely that there was no way to burn Blood Tree to death. The further the distance, the weaker the power of the Blood Tree's roots should be. The Blood Tree came back to its senses and instructed the roots to follow closely behind. Moreover, it also knew that Yun Chujo had a large kitchen knife and that Zhao Hui had a foil bucket, so it targeted Li Zhuangji and the others. It finally figured it out. It was also confused just now. No matter what, it should first absorb the spiritual power of the 5 people so that the ducks in its mouth would not fly away. Li Zhuangji and the others were not as fast as those roots. Soon, they were entangled again and dragged toward the direction of the Blood Tree by those roots. At this time, they could only pin their hopes on Yun Chujo and Zhao Hui, screaming for help. Yun Chujo did not take Jiao, but used the kitchen knife to help them cut off the entangled roots. She did not let Zhao Hui use the earth fire. She wanted to save it for a critical moment. She wanted to burn the Blood Sand Island, but the island was shrouded in mist, and most of the plants that grew there had a lot of moisture. She tried to ignite the plants several times, but she could not burn them on a large scale. She could only give up this idea. Chen Bufan panted and said, "Junior sister Yun, the tide is high now. Even if we can run down there, I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat those bloodthirsty iron-skin sharks." Yun Chujo laughed lightly. There are no bloodthirsty iron-skin sharks on the north side of the Blood Sand Island. Zhao Hui and I came to the island from there. We'll escape from there. When Chen Bufan and the others heard that, they thought that it made sense. If there were bloodthirsty iron-skin sharks on the other side, Yun Chujo and Zhao Hui would not be able to come to the Blood Sand Island. Therefore, hope rekindled in their hearts and they ran as fast as they could towards the back of the Blood Sand Island. However, when they finally reached the back of the Blood Sand Island, they tragically discovered that the surface of the sea was shimmering with scarlet light. It was terrifying under the moonlight. Chapter 4004, How do we break out of this predicament? Just as everyone was in a daze, Blood Tree's sinister laughter could be heard coming from the entire Blood Sand Island. A bunch of idiots. My Blood Sand Island only allows entry and no exit. When you guys came, I naturally wanted to let you guys in. If you want to escape, no way. Following Blood Tree's voice, many roots emerged from the ground. What was worse was that everyone found that their spiritual power had not recovered. It seemed that they could only recover their spiritual power by walking to the original spot on the beach. However, the place had been submerged by the sea and there were many bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks gathered there. They would probably be bitten to death by those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks before they recovered their spiritual power. It would be suicide to go there. Li Zhuangzi's eyes were red. It was possible that a person who was about to die would speak kindly. He said to Yun Chuzhou, "Junior sister Yun, it was all my fault in the past. I am not a human, and I have let you down. If there is a next life, I will definitely make up for my mistake." Chen Bufan also said with shame, "Junior sister Yun, I have let you down. If we can still get out alive, I will do everything I can to repay your kindness. Unfortunately, we will not live." Although the other 3 disciples did not say anything, their faces were also full of shame. In the face of death, the previous grudges were so laughable. They were simply stupid. Yun Chuzhou looked at them. "It's good that you know. After all, there are not many people like me who repay grudges with kindness." Li Zhuangzi and the others, Yun Chuzhou did not bother with these 5 idiots. If she had a choice, she would not have saved them. The main reason was that she and Zhao Hui had been dragged here by the wind and waves. When they saw the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks around them, they had no choice but to stay on the island. Moreover, they had more people and more helpers. Moreover, Li Zhuangzi's father was a direct descendant of Elder Wan. If they could win over Manager Li, they could be considered as a help. However, how could they solve the current predicament? There was a small Wu Yun in the bag on her back, but she had tried it before. Whether it was on the sea or on the island, she could not use it. She had to say that a large kitchen knife was more reliable. Yun Chuzhou narrowed her eyes. Why could spiritual power be used in the sea? Even the original beach could use spiritual power. She had a vague idea in her mind. She consciously brought the group closer to the sea, only to see that the tree roots would not extend forward when they reached a place with seawater. Although the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks could not reach the shallow water area due to their huge size, they continued to attack Yun Chuzhou and the others with water arrows. Fortunately, Yun Chuzhou and the others were quite agile due to the distance. They could still deal with it in a short period of time. Yun Chuzhou's eyes lit up. "Those roots don't seem to like the seawater. Pour it on them," Yun Chuzhou said as she used her kitchen knife to pour seawater on the roots. Sure enough, the roots that were splashed by the seawater began to shrink. Li Zhuangzi and the others were overjoyed when they saw the situation. They poured seawater on the roots with all their might, temporarily forcing the roots back. Finally, they heaved a sigh of relief. Chen Bufan asked admiringly, "Junior sister Yun, how did you know that the roots are afraid of seawater?" Yun Chuzhou did not beat around the bush and explained, "I was just guessing. Firstly, those roots stopped extending when they reached a place with seawater. Secondly, I guessed that the original beach could use spirit energy. I'm afraid that the roots of the blood tree were afraid of the sea water when the tide rose, so the control area could not extend to the original beach." Chapter 4005 was something that had been overlooked. Chen Bufan and the others nodded their heads as they listened. Yun Chuzhou had a belly full of bad ideas. It had originally been a nightmare for them, but now it had become a life-saving medicine. They even suspected that their original self was possessed by a ghost. Otherwise, why would they hate such a kind and intelligent junior sister Yun? In order to save their strength, Yun Chuzhou arranged for 3 people to splash seawater on the roots that were trying to get close. The other 3 people used their clothes to pull the water arrows. After all, they were wearing the uniform of the Nameless Sword sect. It was relatively sturdy. The remaining one was surrounded in the middle for a short rest. This way, they could take turns to have a breather. When the tide was low at dawn, they could reach a place where they could use their spiritual power and then make further plans. Seeing this, the blood tree was so angry that it gritted its teeth. However, it felt that even after dawn, these people would not be able to break through the bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark's blockade. Sooner or later, they would fall into its hands. Finally, the sun rose. The tide began to recede, gradually revealing the originally blood-red beach. Li Zhuangzi and the others were ecstatic. The first thing they needed to do to recover their spiritual power was to swallow pills to replenish their strength. It's a pity that we can't use talismans here. Otherwise, we could have asked the sect for help. Zhao Hui sighed. Chen Bufan laid on the beach and said, now we can only hope that the sect will send someone to check on us after the mission deadline has passed. I'm so tired. I'm going to sleep first. I still have to splash water at night. Yun Chuzhou kicked him and said, what are you talking about? We can't just wait here. The blood tree might have other plans. Although the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks can't come ashore, there might be other sea beasts that can come ashore. By then, we won't be able to survive. Chen Bufan sat up immediately. He basically treated Yun Chujia's words as an imperial edict, so he didn't dare to disobey her. Zhao Hui said from the side, Junior Sister Yun, there are only two ways now. One is to destroy the blood tree, and the second is to break through the blockade of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks and leave this place. However, either one is too difficult. We can't do it at all. Li Zhuangzi and the others also sighed. Yes, the blood tree was so abnormal. Moreover, the area it covered could not even use spiritual power. How could they defeat it? Not to mention those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, there were around 100 to 200 of them. They couldn't defeat them no matter what. Everyone discussed for a while but couldn't come up with a solution. On the contrary, they were even less confident. They all drooped their heads, thinking that they could only live one day at a time. Yun Chuzhou didn't say anything. She carefully combed through the things that had happened in the past few days, and she remembered something that she had neglected. That was why they hadn't encountered any other sea beasts since they entered the Lost Sea. Instead, there were so many bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks here. Moreover, there were many white bones around the blood tree. Besides human bones, many of them belonged to sea beasts. Since the blood tree didn't like seawater, how could it hunt sea beasts? Sea beasts didn't like ambergris like cultivators. They were instinctively alert to danger. Why would they foolishly come to the island? Yun Chuzhou thought about it and looked at the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks in the distance. Previously, the blood tree had said that the blood sand island would allow people to enter but not leave, so the behavior of these bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks was to cooperate with the blood tree. Perhaps they were also helping the blood tree to hunt the sea beasts. But why did they do that? Chapter 4006, I am the smartest person. Yun Chuzhou suddenly stood up and walked towards the sea. Li Zhuangzi and the others were shocked. They hurried over to stop her. Junior Sister Yun, what are you doing? If you continue to walk forward, those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks will eat you. Yun Chuzhou waved her hand. You're thinking too much. I just want to get closer. I'm not stupid, I won't send myself to my death. Hearing her words, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. However, they still followed behind her, afraid that something might go wrong. Forget about being grateful. The main thing was that this little girl was their backbone. If she died, they wouldn't be able to live. After Yun Chuzhou got a little closer to the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, she waved her claws. Hey, little guys, let's talk. Li Zhuangzi and the others stumbled and almost fell into the sea. Junior Sister Yun, is your eyesight bad? Can those behemoths be called little guys? What's there to talk about? They only want to eat us, okay? Those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks were also confused. Is this human girl crazy? Not only is her eyesight bad, but her brain is also bad. Therefore, a few bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks swam towards Yun Chuzhou and began to shoot water arrows. Yun Chuzhou naturally would not be stupid and wait to be shot into a sieve. She raised her spiritual energy barrier and retreated out of the attack range of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks. She sneered and said, a bunch of idiots. I tried to save you with good intentions, but it's fine if you don't appreciate it. Just keep being the executioner of that blood tree. The day the blood tree breaks free is the day you die. After saying that, Yun Chuzhou acted as if nothing had happened. She returned to the beach and began to instruct Zhao Hui to cook the seafood. No matter what, it was more important to fill her stomach first. Chen Bufan moved closer to Yun Chuzhou and asked in a low voice, "Junior sister Yun, what did you mean just now? Why can't I understand?" Yun Chuzhou glanced at him and said, "If you don't understand, then don't ask blindly. Help me cook." Chen Bufan, fine, he didn't ask anything. However, he noticed that the surface of the sea had started to become restless. Some of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks had started to gather and were roaring. It seemed that they were having a heated argument. Yun Chuzhou looked at them coldly and didn't say anything else. She only said after the meal, "Little guys, if you don't want to be controlled by others, now is the best opportunity. Think about it. Those people who came before were killed by the blood tree. Only we are still alive and kicking. What does this mean? It means that we are blessed and blessed. We are sent by the heavens to save you. Also, I am the smartest person in this towering sky continent. Other than me, no one else can help you solve your current predicament. After this village, this shop will be useless. You must not miss it." Yun Chuzhou burped and continued, "Also, all the sea beasts in this area have been killed. I'm afraid that blood tree will soon have its eyes on you. TSK, you're going to die." Blood tree finally couldn't take it anymore. It gritted its teeth and said to the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, "Don't listen to this bitch's nonsense. I won't mistreat you, and I won't hurt you. Your words are better than your singing. It's a pity that there is an idiom called the more you cover up, the more you will be exposed. If you have nothing to hide, why are you so anxious to explain yourself?" Hei Xinzhou secretly gave herself a thumbs up. This idiom was too appropriate. She was getting more and more talented. Chapter 4007, One-Eyed Shark. Blood tree roared in exasperation, "Damn girl, if you continue to spout nonsense, this lord will not be polite to you." Yun Chuzhou shrugged her shoulders, "Look, I've exposed its true colors, so I'm going to kill it to silence it. Little guys, you can choose where you want to go." Blood tree was obviously angry. Those roots no longer cared about the sea water and directly spread to the beach. Almost at the same time, Yun Chuzhou and the others found that their spiritual power was restrained. Yun Chuzhou and the others had no choice but to retreat into the sea water and use their spiritual power to attack the roots. However, the roots continued to spread. The purpose was obvious. They wanted to force Yun Chuzhou and the others into the attack range of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks. Zhao Hui said anxiously, "Junior sister Yun, this can't go on. Think of something quickly." Chen Bufan and the others looked at Yun Chuzhou expectantly. They had already regarded Yun Chuzhou as their backbone. Yun Chuzhou blinked her eyes and turned to look at the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks that had not made any moves. Now, she could only take a gamble. "Little guys, even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about your descendants, right? Are you always under the control of others? I'm sure you've already made your decision based on your intelligence. Come over, let's force this ugly monster back to the island together. Let's think of a way to kill it completely and eliminate any future troubles." As expected, the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks moved and swam towards Yun Chuzhou and the others. However, Zhao Hui and the others revealed terrified expressions. Who knew if these bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks were here to help or to eat people? Only Yun Chuzhou was calm and collected. She even had the leisure to wave her claws at the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks. Blood tree sneered in his heart. This darn girl was too naive. Those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks had been firmly controlled by her. Did she think that a few words could make them betray her? How stupid. The bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks were getting closer and closer to Yun Chuzhou and the others. What made Zhao Hui and the others slightly relieved was that they did not attack. Perhaps they were really here to help. However, they stopped about 30 meters away from Yun Chujiu and the others and stopped moving. Yun Chujiu swam in their direction. Zhao Hui and the others were completely dumbfounded. Was she going to throw her life away? However, they still had to stop the spreading roots, so they could only let Yun Chujiu swim over. Yun Chujiu swam to the front of those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks and said with a smile, "Although you can understand my words, I can't understand your words. Why don't you send a representative to establish a spiritual connection with me?" A bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark swam to the front, and Yun Chujiu found that this bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark was actually blind in one eye. She didn't know whether it was caused by the hunting process. Yun Chujiu immediately established a spiritual sense connection with this one-eyed shark. The one-eyed shark's somewhat cold voice sounded in Yun Chujiu's spiritual sense. "Little girl, you really have guts. However, we haven't decided whether to cooperate with you or not. It depends on your ability." The corners of Yun Chujiu's mouth curled up. "Tell me, what did that blood tree threaten you with?" The one-eyed shark said in a low voice, "Many sea beasts used to live on this blood sand island. This is also the paradise of our bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark. Because of the fragrance of the golden dragon, some cultivators would come here occasionally. In order to make it easier for us to hunt, we set up our nest at the bottom of the sea under the blood sand island. However, something unexpected happened a few months ago." Chapter 4008, Cubs. The one-eyed shark seemed to have recalled some bad memories. It paused for a moment before continuing. "That blood tree suddenly appeared on Blood Sand Island. While we were out hunting, its roots extended into our nest. All the cubs were poisoned by its roots. Only by regularly taking the juice that it used its roots to deliver could their lives be extended. We had no way to detoxify the poison, so we could only listen to its arrangements and help it hunt. Little girl, unless you can detoxify our cubs, we will not cooperate with you. After all, those cubs are the hope for the survival of our race." When Yun Chujiu heard the one-eyed shark's words, she immediately said with a smile, "If it's another problem, I really don't have any solutions. But if it's poison, I'm not bragging. There's no poison in this world that I can't detoxify." Although the one-eyed shark felt that Yun Chujiu was too arrogant, they were still desperate. After all, the sea beasts nearby were either dead or hiding. In the end, the blood tree would probably kill them too. "Since that's the case, follow me. As long as you can cure the young's poison, we're at your disposal," the one-eyed shark said. Yun Chujiu nodded and immediately called Zhao Hui and the others who were still fighting against the roots of the blood tree over. Zhao Hui and the others had no other choice but to swim over. Yun Chujiu said to them, "I'm going to do something. You guys wait for me here. Don't worry, with them protecting you, the blood tree won't do anything to you." Zhao Hui and the others were about to cry. "Protect? Are you sure these bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks are protecting them and not eating them? Besides, it was too uncomfortable to keep soaking in the sea." Yun Chujiu probably had a conscience. She summoned a ship from her storage ring and asked Zhao Hui and the others to wait on the ship. Then, she said to the one-eyed shark, "With them as hostages, you should be relieved, right? Let's go. Bring me there to take a look." Zhao Hui and the others, hostage. "Junior sister Yun, do you know that you won't have any friends like this?" Although the blood tree didn't hear what the one-eyed shark and Yun Chujiu said, it had already guessed a little. It sneered in its heart. How could a puny human be able to solve its trick? Those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks still wanted to struggle. It was really laughable. In the end, they could only obediently listen to its arrangements. Yun Chujiu followed the one-eyed shark to the bottom of the sea. If other factors were taken into account, the scenery below was still pretty good. The sea water was clear, and the bottom of the sea was a patch of snow-white sand with seaweed swaying gently with the waves. The nest of this group of bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks was set up in a reef at the bottom of the sea, and there were more than a dozen bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks patrolling around. The status of the one-eyed shark was obviously not low. When the patrolling bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks saw that it had brought a little human girl over, although they were puzzled, they did not stop it. Yun Chujo soon saw dozens of bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks' babies. Those babies looked very lively, but each of them had a bright red mark on their back. The one-eyed shark said with grief and indignation, "Do you see that red bloodline? If you can't take the blood tree's juice on time, that bloodline will explode, and these babies will be in so much pain that they wish they were dead." Yun Chujo scolded with righteous indignation, "That ugly monster is really not a thing. He actually used such a despicable method. Don't worry, I will definitely be able to help these poor little things detoxify." Chapter 4009, Bloodline. The one-eyed shark was skeptical of Yun Chuji's words. To be honest, if it hadn't been forced into a corner, it wouldn't have believed this little girl's nonsense. This little girl's age was too young. Even if she had learned medical skills from her mother's womb, it was impossible for her to be that high. How could she possibly cure the blood tree's poison? However, they had no other choice now. The previous group of cultivators had all been killed by the blood tree. These people could at least fight against the blood tree. Perhaps they really had some skills. Just as the one-eyed shark was thinking, Yun Chujo said to it, "I have to see what kind of poison it is up close. Call a cub over and let me take a look." The one-eyed shark immediately called a more gentle cub over. The cub curiously sized up Yun Chujo with its big round eyes. Yun Chuji's heart suddenly softened when the cub looked at her with its innocent eyes. Generally speaking, all kinds of cubs were adorable because there were no impurities in their eyes. It was so pure that it made one's heart soften unconsciously. Yun Chujo touched the cub's head with her hand and then carefully looked at the bloodline on its back. Yun Chujo was surprised to find that the bloodline was not still. It was still moving slowly. She reached out to touch the bloodline. The bloodline began to twist and struggle, as if it was going to break through the cub's skin. The baby immediately let out a scream and broke free from Yun Chuji's touch. The one-eyed shark was disheartened. It seemed that this little girl had no way to detoxify the poison. Could it be that their baby was really hopeless? Just as it was thinking, Yun Chujo touched her chin and said, "That is not poison. It looks like a goo." The one-eyed shark looked at Yun Chujo in confusion. It had never heard of goo poison. After all, sea beasts were rarely poisoned, let alone goo poison. Yun Chujo continued, "I'm not sure what it is. It could be goo, or it could be something else. But one thing is for sure, the blood tree has no intention of letting these cubs go. If I am not wrong, these cubs are growing extremely slowly, they even show signs of regressing. This is because the nutrients and spiritual power in their bodies have been absorbed by the blood veins. When your value is exhausted, these cubs will be completely devoured by these blood veins." The one-eyed shark's huge body trembled a few times. This little girl was right, the bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark cubs were growing very quickly, but these cubs had not changed much over the past few months. Could it be that what the little girl said was true? Yun Chujo knew that she was right the moment she saw the one-eyed shark's reaction. She narrowed her eyes and said, "If you want to completely remove these bloodlines from the cubs' bodies, you have to give me a chance to observe them properly. How about this? I'll knock out a cub so that it won't resist my inspection." Although the one-eyed shark was a little worried, it had no other choice but to let Yun Chujo knock out the previously docile baby. Yun Chujo then moved closer to the baby's back to observe the bloodline. With Yun Chuji's touch, the bloodline began to swim around the baby's back. Fortunately, the baby was already unconscious, or else the pain would be unbearable. The one-eyed shark at the side looked at the bloodline that kept swimming around. Its heart was filled with hatred for the blood tree. If it was not for the little girl, they might have been kept in the dark. The blood tree had never intended to let these cubs go. Chapter 4010, Go Away by Yun Chujo frowned as she looked at the bloodline. It did not seem to be a goo. She looked closer and exclaimed, "This is not a goo, it is the root of the blood tree." The one-eyed shark was stunned. the root of the blood tree. If it is the root of the blood tree, wouldn't it lose its life if it was broken? Why are they still moving? Yun Chujo shook her head. I don't quite understand either, but if you look closely, the patterns of the bloodlines are exactly the same as the roots of the blood tree. The one-eyed shark looked closely. It was obvious that the roots were very similar to the roots of the blood tree. Could it really be the roots of the blood tree? Perhaps it's a secret method of the blood tree. Moreover, every time it comes to feed the pups juice, it's not to detoxify them, but to absorb the spiritual energy and nutrients that the bloodlines absorb from the pups. These pups of yours are just a moving reserve of food for it. Yun Chujia's tone was a little cold. She inexplicably thought of Guai Chao. Damn it, she was practically the same as these pups, the damn dog tail. Guai Chao in her dantian was dumbfounded. How could this be related to it? Moreover, could these lowly roots of the blood tree be compared to it? After hearing Yun Chujia's words, the one-eyed shark was filled with grief and indignation. It wished that it could immediately go to the blood tree and fight to the death. However, the most important thing now was how to remove these bloodlines from the pups' bodies. Do you have a way to remove the blood veins? The one-eyed shark's tone was much gentler than before. There was even a hint of anticipation in it. Yun Chujo rubbed her chin and thought about it. This was really not an easy thing to do. The most direct way was naturally to cut open the baby's back and remove the blood veins to destroy them. However, if she used a knife to cut open the baby's back, the blood veins would definitely wander around. If it was not done properly, it would take the baby's life, then, the gains would not be worth the losses. Yun Chujo told the one-eyed shark about her worries and the one-eyed shark was also dumbfounded. That's right, then what should she do? Could she only watch helplessly? Just as Yun Chujo was at a loss of what to do, the cat cub in the spiritual beast bag, or more accurately, the white tiger, suggested with the intention of atoning for her sins, "Little fairy, can't you just think of a way to prevent the blood veins from wandering?" Nonsense, if I had a way to prevent the blood veins from wandering, I wouldn't have to worry. You're acting like you didn't say anything. Yun Chujo said in an annoyed tone. Yun Chujo had also finished yelling at the kitten, and she suddenly had an idea. Yes, she could completely use a silver needle to fix the blood veins, as long as she moved fast enough, before the blood veins broke free. She could totally pull it out from the back of the kitten. Moreover, she found that the bloodline basically did not have any intelligence. It was just seeking benefits and avoiding harm. As long as she was fast enough, she could totally achieve her goal. Yun Chujo told the one-eyed shark about her idea. The one-eyed shark did not agree at the beginning. It felt that it was too risky. It would be good if it succeeded, but once she was a little slower, the bloodline would continue to drift away. It might even kill the kitten. However, after Yun Chujia's boasting, the one-eyed shark still agreed. Forget it, let's take a gamble. Therefore, Yun Chujo directly used the unconscious baby as the first test subject. She took out a 3-inch long silver needle from her storage ring and gestured its length. She felt that it was enough to temporarily stabilize the bloodline. A hint of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes as she suddenly stabbed towards the middle of the bloodline. Chapter 40:11, Single Eye. Almost at the same time that the bloodline was pierced, the kitchen knife in Yun Chujia's hand had already cut the back of the baby. At the same time, her other hand grabbed one end of the bloodline, pulled out the silver needle, and pulled out the bloodline. The one-eyed shark stared at the bloodline in Yun Chujia's hand with its mouth agape. It was surprisingly the root of a blood tree, but it was much smaller than the other roots. The roots struggled in Yun Chujia's hand, trying to pierce through Yun Chujia's skin. Yun Chujo sneered. She would not give it a chance to pierce through her skin. Even if it was lucky enough to enter her body, it would be feeding the Guai Chao and the other two. Yun Chujia's right hand flashed with red light, and the bloodline was instantly burned into ashes by the small flame. Although the power of the small flame was limited in the water, it was still effortless to burn the bloodline. The one-eyed shark was dumbfounded by what it saw. Yun Chujia's series of actions were really too fast. However, only this little girl could remove the bloodline from the body of the baby so quickly. Yun Chujio took out a pill to stop the bleeding and fed it to the baby. Although the wound on the back looked quite scary, the self-healing ability of the demon beast was very strong, and the baby would probably be alive and kicking soon. Yun Chujio looked at the one-eyed shark. How is it? Do you want to continue? The one-eyed shark nodded quickly. Of course, it had to continue. As long as it took out all the blood veins on the baby's back, they would no longer have to be threatened by the blood tree. However, Yun Chujio did not take action immediately. Instead, she looked at it with a smile and said, "As you can see, my method is very good. However, it consumes both physical strength and medicinal pills. Most importantly, I have to prevent the blood veins from attacking me. You have to show some sincerity, right?" The one-eyed shark was dumbfounded. What did he mean? How did this style change so quickly? Didn't he look like he was ready to discuss it? Why were they talking about conditions now? Single Eye, don't be angry. I'm absolutely different from that old thing blood tree. I'm just trying to protect myself. After all, how can we 7 little weaklings be a match for a group of behemoths like you? If I save all the cubs and you turn against me, where are we going to cry? So, let's establish a temporary contract first. When we work together to destroy Blood Tree and safely escape, I will definitely cancel the contract. Yun Chujio said sincerely. Single Eye. The Single Eye shark was furious. It hated being called Single Eye the most. It had a high status among the sharks. Usually, no shark dared to call it that. It did not expect this little girl to actually call it Single Eye. It was really angered to death. However, even though it was angry, the Single Eye shark still reluctantly established a temporary contract with Yun Chujio. There was no other reason. Other than this little girl, no one else could save these cubs. Moreover, even if this little girl had bad intentions and wanted to take its life, its death was not worth it. As long as it could save these cubs, it would be fine. The reason why Yun Chujio chose to contract the one-eyed shark was firstly because she felt that its status was not low. Secondly, after coming into contact with it, she found that the one-eyed shark was more reasonable. With it as a medium of communication, it would be easier for her to proceed to the next step. After the contract was completed, Yun Chujio began to take out the bloodlines from the other cubs. Other than a few that were slightly flawed, the rest of the process was very smooth. The reason why there were flaws was that some of the blood veins actually broke the body into 2 pieces. Fortunately, Yun Chujio was prepared and used another silver needle to fix it. In the end, she still took out the blood veins from the pups' bodies. Chapter 40:12, She did it. Yun Chujio took out all the blood veins on the back of the cubs and burned them. She leaned against a reef, feeling a little exhausted. Although it did not consume much spiritual power and physical strength, it was easy for people to feel tired when they suddenly relaxed because they had to be highly focused. This was also because she had the water-repellent bead. Otherwise, she would not have been able to stay underwater for so long. The one-eyed shark also realized this, but it obediently did not ask. This little girl seemed to have many secrets. Other things aside, the flames in her palm were a little strange. The cubs also gradually woke up. Although they could feel the pain in their backs, they realized that the bloodlines that had tortured them were gone. They immediately swam around Yun Chujio excitedly. Yun Chujio rested for a while and then said to the one-eyed shark, in order to prevent the blood tree from attacking these cubs again, bring them to the surface of the sea. The one-eyed shark felt that what Yun Chujio said made sense. It immediately asked the bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark, who was responsible for protecting the cubs, to escort the cubs to the surface of the sea. It swam at the back of the team with Yun Chujio. The cubs would occasionally turn around and swim to Yun Chujio's side. They would even use their heads to gently touch Yun Chujio to express their intimacy. In the end, Yun Chujio could only swim to the middle of the cubs and swim to the surface of the sea under their escort. The one-eyed shark could not help but smile bitterly. From the looks of it, the little girl did not need to establish a contract with it at all. If they were to turn hostile, the cubs would probably not agree to it. At this moment, on the surface of the sea, Zhao Hui and the others were sitting on pins and needles. They were practically itching for it. The bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks were also a little irritated. A few of them even used their tails to ram into the big ship a few times, almost scaring Zhao Hui and the others to death. They felt that if Yunchujiu did not return, these bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks would probably unleash their ferocious nature and eat them up. Just as they were fidgeting, the waves in the distance churned, and a few bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks emerged from the water. Soon after, several young bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks also emerged from the water, and the junior sister Yun that they had been longing for was riding on the one-eyed shark and waving her claws at them. Zhao Hui and the others were dumbfounded at first, and then tears almost fell. They were saved. Although they didn't know how junior sister Yun did it, since she was able to ride on the back of the one-eyed shark, it meant that she must have gained the recognition of the one-eyed shark. Whether they could defeat the blood tree or not, they at least had a way out. The bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark's attention was not on Yunchujiu, but on the lively cubs. Although they did not know that the blood veins on the backs of the cubs had been removed, hearing their happy cries, they knew that the little girl had most likely done it. Of course, there was one person, no, a shark, who was extremely depressed. The one-eyed shark felt aggrieved. This little girl was too mean. After swimming for a while, she said that her strength was exhausted and that she could not swim anymore. The cubs scrambled to carry her. As an elder, could it watch the injured cubs carry the little girl? Therefore, the final result was that she became the smelly girl's mount. The leader of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks could not wait to welcome her. When it saw that although there was a wound on the back of the cubs, there was no longer any bloodline, it could not help but look up at the sky and wail. God bless. The bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks were finally saved. Chapter 40:13 The sorrowful cries of the sharks. Following the sorrowful cries of the leader of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, all the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks on the surface of the sea raised their heads to the sky and cried sorrowfully. At this moment, they finally had the opportunity to vent their pent-up anger and resentment from the past few days. It was not easy for the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks to breed offspring. If these cubs died prematurely, there would not be any new cubs born for decades. That was why they were threatened by the blood tree. The cubs also responded to the sorrowful wails of the elders with their tender voices. Although they did not know much about what the elders had done for them, it did not prevent them from feeling the repressed grief and indignation. Yunchujiu sighed silently. Let's see. Whether it was humans or demonic beasts, they had to become stronger. Otherwise, they could only be controlled by humans. When Blood Tree heard the loud and mournful cry, it was shocked and uncertain. Could it be that the stinky girl really did it? How did she do it? If it lost control of these bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, it would not be able to hunt more demonic beasts and humans. This stinky girl really deserved to die. Although Blood Tree was very annoyed, it thought about it. Even if the sharks broke away from its control, it would not be a big deal. Even if the few humans and the sharks joined hands, they would not be able to do anything to it. After all, it could not use its spiritual power in the area covered by its roots. Moreover, those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks could not leave the deep sea area, so they could not pose a threat to it. With this thought, the Blood Tree felt a little more at ease. Anyway, as long as the golden dragon incense was around, there would be cultivators who would come to die. It was not in a hurry. One day, it would break free from this damn restraint. At the same time, Yunchujiu was also discussing with the sharks about how to destroy the Blood Tree. The one-eyed shark acted as a translator and kept feeding the sharks' opinions back to Yunchujiu. We have no way to go ashore to deal with the Blood Tree. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been threatened by it. We would have forced it to detoxify long ago. Moreover, even if we can go ashore, the roots of the blood tree will restrict spiritual power wherever it goes. We are not its match even if we go up. Little girls, why don't you leave this place? Well, swim to the deep sea and let it go. Chen Bufan and the others also felt that it was a good idea to leave this place temporarily. They were not a match for the blood tree alone, so they might as well go back to the sect and ask for help. Yun Chujiu thought for a moment and said, "Of course, I want to leave as well. However, this blood tree is very strange. It might cause a bigger disaster in the future. It's better to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. In particular, the method it uses to control the young sharks is too sinister. Perhaps it will soon find a replacement for the sharks. At that time, it's probably useless no matter how far the sharks hide. Of course, everything I said is under the premise of ensuring our own safety. Let me think about it first. If there isn't a perfect plan, then it's not too late for us to retreat." Yun Chuji's words moved the sharks. She was right. If the blood tree used the same method to control other sea beasts, then all the sea beasts in the Lost Sea would suffer. Moreover, they hated the blood tree. It would be best if they could kill the blood tree. Yun Chujiu let the one-eyed shark take her to the bottom of the sea again. She wanted to see the situation below the blood sand island at a close distance. The one-eyed shark naturally would not refuse and carried Yun Chujiu to the bottom of the sea. According to what Yun Chujiu knew, there were only 3 types of islands. One was a protruding land that was directly connected to the Earth's crust. The second type was a coral island, which was formed from the accumulation of coral bones. The third type was a volcanic island, which was formed after the lava from the volcano cooled down. So, which is this blood sand island? Chapter 40:14, The main body of the blood tree. While Yun Chujiu was thinking, the one-eyed shark said, "The blood sand island is right in front of us. Although the roots of the blood tree won't easily spread in the sea, it's better for us to stay far away just in case." Yun Chujiu looked up and saw an island in the distance. However, that island was floating in the sea. To be exact, it was fixed to the bottom of the sea by several chains. Just as Yun Chujiu was surprised. The one-eyed shark said from the side, "Originally, this blood sand island was connected to the bottom. I don't know what happened, but a few months ago, it suddenly broke into 2 pieces from the middle, and then these chains appeared." Yun Chujiu was surprised and remembered that the blood tree had said that if it absorbed enough spiritual power, it would break free from the chains. Could it be that the blood tree's so-called breaking free was to break free from these chains? Yun Chujiu sorted out her train of thought. According to the one-eyed shark, the blood sand island was peaceful previously, which meant that the blood tree was originally suppressed under the sea, and for some unknown reason, it broke free of a part of the chains. That was why it appeared on the blood sand island. Once these chains were all broken, the blood tree would completely regain its freedom. Yun Chujiu frowned. Logically speaking, these chains should have locked the blood tree, but why did they lock the entire blood sand island? Yun Chujiu thought about it and a strange thought arose in her mind. Could it be that the entire blood sand island was the main body of the blood tree? Although Yun Chujiu felt that this thought was somewhat inconceivable, in order to verify her own thoughts, she released De Hua. When the one-eyed shark saw De Hua, it was dumbfounded. This was the legendary spiritual beast, right? But it was just a little piglet. What kind of attack power did this thing have? However, in the next moment, it changed its mind because De Hua had turned black. The one-eyed shark was frightened by De Hua's huge figure and shivered. It thought to itself, "This little girl really doesn't show her true colors." However, what did she want to do by releasing this spiritual beast? "De Hua, go and attack that floating island. Remember not to touch those chains," Yun Chujiu instructed. The one-eyed shark was even more confused now. Was this little girl crazy? Although the blood tree grew on the blood sand island, what was the point of attacking the blood sand island? It originally thought that this little girl was smart, but now it turned out that she was also stupid. While the single-eyed shark was thinking, De Hua had already begun to attack the Blood Sand Island. At first, there was nothing unusual, but soon, the roots of the blood tree spread out and began to counterattack. After Yun Chujiu let the single-eyed shark carry her and retreat, she sneered and said, "Single-eye, do you understand now? This entire Blood Sand Island is the main body of the blood tree. However, first, it is to trap sea beasts and cultivators, and second, it is to isolate the seawater, so it is wrapped in a layer of outer shell. We only need to peel off its shell to see its main body. By then, we can completely destroy it." The one-eyed shark was confused. It asked in puzzlement, "What? What do you mean?" Yun Chujiu could only explain, in other words, the blood tree was suppressed to the bottom of the sea for some reason. However, it might have been too long, and the seal was loosened. It thought of ways to gather the rocks and sand below to hide its main body. Finally, a few months ago, its seal loosened again. Only then did it reveal a part of its true form on the Blood Sand Island. You will know what happened after that. As for the small island that you mentioned, it broke into two parts. The blood tree must have broken its outer shell when it broke free from its true form. That was why you misunderstood that it was the mountain range that broke. Chapter 40 15 Blood Trees Conspiracy. The one-eyed shark finally understood what Yun Chujiu meant. It widened its eyes in surprise. If this little girl's guess was correct, wouldn't they be able to take revenge themselves? Yun Chujiu let De Hua attack a few more times to confirm her judgment. She immediately rode the one-eyed shark back to the surface of the sea. After the one-eyed shark told everyone about Yun Chujiu's judgment, the leader of the group of sharks immediately brought the group of sharks to the bottom of the sea and began to besiege the Blood Sand Island that was chained up. Although Zhao Hui and the others did not use water-repellent beads, Yun Chujiu gave them a lot of water-repellent beads, so they also dived into the water to attack the Blood Sand Island together. The group of sharks hated the blood tree to the core. They used all their strength to attack. Even the young ones kept attacking with water arrows from behind. Even in their dreams, the blood tree did not expect Yun Chujiu to see through its tricks. Although its shell was strong, it could not withstand the shark's attacks. Soon, the rocks and mud attached to the blood tree fell to the bottom of the sea, revealing the blood tree's true form. The blood tree waved its roots crazily and shouted angrily, "I'll give you one more chance. Leave this place immediately. I'll let bygones be bygones. If you're still stubborn, I'll kill you all together." Blood tree's threat was obviously effective. The leader of the sharks hesitated. Yun Chujiu sneered, "Don't listen to its nonsense. If it really had that ability, it would have broken free from the restraints here long ago. Don't forget one thing. If you don't get rid of the roots, there will be trouble in the future. If we don't kill this ugly monster today, there will definitely be trouble in the future. If you're worried, just keep the cubs away. The rest of you, attack." The leader of the sharks thought about it and agreed. Even if the blood tree really wanted to fight to the death, as long as they could keep the cubs alive, it wouldn't matter even if they died. Thus, the sharks continued to attack. Seeing that the threat was ineffective, the blood tree could only continue to fight with the sharks. Blood tree gradually lost its ability to resist. Suddenly, many tiny red roots shot out from the main trunk of blood tree. Yun Chujiu was shocked. "Don't let those roots enter your bodies. Those roots are the things that entered the bodies of the young." When the sharks heard Yun Chujiu's warning, they hurriedly dodged or used water arrows to shatter the red roots. Only a few bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks were pierced by the red roots. Yun Chujiu was afraid that things would change, so she ordered the sharks to continue attacking while she quickly took the one-eyed sharks and began to remove the red roots from the bodies of the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks. Unexpectedly, when she was taking one of the red roots, the red root drilled into Yun Chujiu's left palm at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, the chained body of the blood tree shattered into powder. Yun Chujiu's arrogant voice came from within the body of the blood tree, "Damned girl. You've ruined this lord's plan. This lord can use your body to escape from the restraints, ha ha ha. Zhao Hui and the others were stunned for a moment before they reacted. The reason why the blood tree had mixed its soul with the red roots was to possess her. It was over. Now that the blood tree had entered Junior Sister Yun's body, Junior Sister Yun would definitely be possessed. At that time, wouldn't Junior Sister Yun become the blood tree? The sharks were also dumbfounded. No one had expected such a turn of events. Then, the problem came. What should they do now? If they wanted to eradicate the root of the problem, they should undoubtedly kill Yun Chuzhou. This way, they wouldn't give the blood tree the chance to possess her and then completely destroy her. However, Yun Chuzhou would definitely not survive this. Chapter 40:16 had been eaten by Guai Chao. The sharks began to quarrel fiercely. Although Zhao Hui and the others could not understand the sharks' cries, they could guess a thing or two. In fact, they were also very conflicted. They naturally did not want Yun Chuzhou to die, but if she was possessed by the blood tree, then Yun Chuzhou would not be Yun Chuzhou anymore. The sharks finally came to a conclusion. Several bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks surrounded Yun Chuzhou. It was clear that they wanted to kill Yun Chuzhou before the blood tree successfully possessed her, so as to avoid any future trouble. The one-eyed shark could not bear to do so, but there were too many sharks that claimed to kill Yun Chuzhou. It could not stop them at all. It could only watch from the side dejectedly. At this moment, the cubs that were hiding in the distance rushed over with sharp roars. They used their mouths and tails to push the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks that surrounded Yun Chuzhou. The cubs' actions not only shocked the sharks, but also Zhao Hui and the others. At the same time, a sense of shame welled up in their hearts. They didn't even have the conscience of these cubs. Even if Junior Sister Yun was in danger of being possessed, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, they shouldn't give up. Thus, Zhao Hui and the others stood in front of Yun Chuzhou. If the shark group attacked, then they could only fight to the death with the shark group. The sharks were obviously shocked by the actions of the cubs. They did not have the awareness of Zhao Hui and the others, but the cubs protected Yun Chuzhou, Zhao Hui, and the others in the middle. They had no way to attack Yun Chuzhou at all. The situation was at a stalemate for a moment. The blood tree, which had already entered Yun Chuzhou's body, was overjoyed when it saw the situation. As long as it entered this wretched girl's spiritual sense and swallowed her spiritual sense, it could successfully possess her. After that, it would be able to use these idiots as cover and escape. Just as the blood tree was enjoying itself, it could not help but slide towards the direction of its dantian. The blood tree was shocked. The direction it was heading towards was the wretched girl's head. How could it slide down? It desperately tried to swim upwards. However, it was unable to resist the huge force coming from its dantian. Very quickly, it slid down to Yun Chuzhou's dantian. Before it could even figure out what was going on, it was pressed down by the leaves of the Guai Chao. Then, the Guai Chao began to nibble away at it. Guai Chao thought that it was because of this good-for-nothing that it was scolded. It could use it to make up for the trauma in its heart. Before the blood tree could even cry for help, it was nibbled away by the Guai Chao. Yun Chuzhou had been watching coldly from the side. She was confident enough to deal with the blood tree. Even if the blood tree could swim into her spiritual sense, she could still command the weapon spirits to attack it, let alone the Guai Chao. Thinking of the weapon spirits, Yun Chuzhou could not help but feel a little guilty. Those weapon spirits were all abducted from the ancient sword tomb, and they were all offensive spirit weapons. There were even several immortal swords. It did not seem good for her to occupy them just like that. Of course, the reason why Qi Ling said that he was not too good was not because he felt sorry for those weapon spirits, but because he felt sorry for himself. It was really a waste to just leave so many good things lying around. She had to think of a way to make full use of them when she had the chance. Yun Chuzhou glanced at Zhao Hui and the others and the shark group again. Finally, her gaze fell on those cubs. These little things were still very naive and cute. It was not in vain for her to save them. Yun Chujo saw that the strange grass had already swallowed all of the blood tree. Then, she said slowly, "Alright, you don't have to consider whether you want to kill me or not. It's most likely because my blood is poisonous. The blood tree is already dead." Chapter 40:17 was rich. As soon as Yun Chujia's words left her mouth, both Xiao Hui and Sha Kun looked at her suspiciously. That was because they really couldn't tell if it was Yun Chujio or Blood Tree who was speaking. Yun Chujio rolled her eyes and said to Li Zhuangji and the others, "Senior brother Li, senior brother Chen, I still remember the spiritual stones you owe me. Don't tell me you still think that I'll go back on my words after I die." Yun Chujio looked at the Single Eye Shark again. "Single Eye, we have established a temporary contract. If I am possessed by the blood tree, can you not feel it?" "Idiot." The moment Yun Chujio said those words, both Xiao Hui and the sharks immediately believed that she was Yun Chujio, because the only one who could say such derogatory words was that pervert Yun Chujio. Especially the one-eyed shark. It could feel that the temporary contract was still there. This was enough to prove that Yun Chujio was not possessed. It immediately heaved a sigh of relief in its heart. This crisis was finally over. Yun Chujio went to the place where the blood tree was originally locked and circled around. When she realized that the thick chains were all 10,000-year-old black iron, she almost went crazy with joy. Because the blood tree had already turned into ashes, the array formation of the iron chains had also been broken by itself. Yun Chujio easily put the iron chains into her bag one by one. Although Zhao Hui and the others were envious, they did not have the face to compete with Yun Chujio. Instead, they helped her to drag the 10,000-year-old black iron chains. The cubs kept circling around Yun Chujio. One of them gave Yun Chujio something. Yun Chujio looked at it and exclaimed, "Hey, isn't this the legendary white ambergris?" It turned out that the blood tree had collected a lot of ambergris to attract cultivators. Once it was destroyed, the ambergris naturally fell to the bottom of the sea. In order to please Yun Chujio, the cubs picked the most beautiful color and gave it to Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio's eyes immediately lit up. She immediately asked the cubs to help her find the scattered ambergris. The cubs were naturally very willing to help her. Some adult bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks even helped her look for it. Li Zhuangji and the others looked at it and suddenly felt as if their hearts were going crazy. Back then, they had risked great danger to pick up a few pieces of brown ambergris on the beach. Each and every one of them was about to go crazy with joy. However, junior sister Yun had easily obtained a few sacks of ambergris. It was simply infuriating. After cleaning up the battlefield, everyone floated to the surface of the sea. The group of sharks returned the large ship that they had dragged down to Yun Chujio and the others. After everyone boarded the ship, Yun Chujio shed a few crocodile tears and then left the group of sharks that were reluctant to part. On the large ship, Li Zhuangji and the others who had survived the disaster collapsed on the deck. The experiences these few days were simply soul-stirring. They had narrowly escaped death several times, and it was simply extremely dangerous. They were filled with gratitude towards Yun Chujio. If junior sister Yun had not put aside their past grudges and saved them, they would have died hundreds of times already. Just as they were about to solemnly express their gratitude towards Yun Chujio. However, they saw Yun Chujio take out a small notebook and read, "Li Zhuangji, 10 double-tailed jumping fish, 3 cracked clams, and 2 giant pincer prawns. Consider it a friendship price, just give me 100,000 high-grade spirit stones. Chen Bufan, 8 double-tailed jumping fish. In order to save you, I used 2 foil buckets of king-level fire essence beast earth fire. I'll give you a 99 to 81 discount. Each of you owes me 1 million high-grade spirit stones. Also, the waterproof beads I lent you before were quite expensive, are you paying or borrowing?" Li Zhuangji and the others, forget it. It seemed that there was no need to be grateful, because they would have to work hard for her for the rest of their lives. Chapter 40:18, Happy Butt-Face. Yun Chujio looked at the few of them who wanted to cry but had no tears. The corners of her mouth curled up. Although gratitude could last for a period of time, it was far less profound than debt. Moreover, gratitude was too heavy and made people numb. It was more suitable for her to be a creditor. Therefore, under the coercion of He Xinjiu, Li Zhuangji, and the others wrote down the loan slip. The amount written on it made their hearts bleed. They would not be able to repay it in a few decades. Yun Chuzhou was satisfied and kept the loan slip. Then, she painfully took out a few brown golden dragon joss sticks and stuffed them into Li Zhuangzi's hands. Just use these to hand in the mission. I'm quite generous. The corners of Li Zhuangji and the others' eyes twitched. Generous? Those bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks had helped her collect a few sacks of golden dragon joss sticks. Moreover, the quality was high quality. These few pieces were simply a drop in the bucket. However, even if these few pieces were sold, they would still be worth a lot of spirit stones. She could be considered to have some conscience. Compared to her, Yun Chuzhou was practically a slave who had turned over a new leaf and was singing. Whether it was cooking or being on duty, she did not need to do anything. All she needed to do was to sit on the recliner and bask in the sun. She simply felt great. However, this fellow still had some worries in his heart. He did not know if the Divine Devil Hall and the 9 pavilions would have any tricks up their sleeves. He could only deal with them as they came. They could not hide in the Nameless Sword sect just because of unknown dangers. If that was the case, there was no way to increase their combat experience. However, the next few days went very smoothly. There were no abnormalities, and everyone arrived on land safely. The fishermen originally thought that Yun Chuzhou and the others had lost their lives, but they did not expect them to return safely. Yun Chuzhou bought a lot of sea goods and kept them for her to eat at the Nameless Sword sect. When Li Zhuangji and the others thought of the sky-high price of the sea goods that Yun Chuzhou sold to them, they immediately bought a lot of them to avoid being cheated by Yun Chuzhou in the future. In this way, the fishermen were extremely happy. They sold almost all of their stocks and made a small fortune. The group left the beach on foot. They only needed to walk another 100 miles before they could use their flying spirit tools. Yun Chuzhou narrowed her eyes. If someone wants to ambush us, this 100 miles is the most suitable place to set up an ambush, so everyone should be careful. Although Li Zhuangji and the others' attitudes towards Yun Chuzhou had changed a lot, they still felt that she was being alarmist. They were the disciples of the Nameless Sword sect, so who would dare to ambush them? The previously noisy Divine Devil Hall had vanished without a trace due to the joint search by the various major factions. Even if the remaining factions were at odds with the Nameless Sword sect, they would not openly attack the disciples of the Nameless Sword sect. Seeing that they did not take it to heart, Yun Chuzhou immediately summoned Buttface. Although this fellow was a little useless, he was very alert. If there was an ambush nearby, he would definitely be able to discover it. Buttface was suffocating inside the spirit beast bag. Now that he was finally released, he was naturally having fun on the ground. Although he could not speak due to the presence of others, he could still communicate with Yun Chuzhou using his spiritual sense. Little fairy, I miss you to death. Congratulations on making a windfall again. I have to say that you are getting worse and worse. Buttface's eyes were full of flattery. Yun Chuzhou had already gotten used to this guy's strange way of thinking. She just curled the corners of her mouth and ignored this idiot. Buttface did not mind. He was jumping around like a little girl. Zhao Hui smiled and said, Junior Sister Yun, although your spirit pet is just an ordinary spirit dog, it has a lively personality. It's not bad to use it to relieve boredom. Buttface glared at Zhao Hui with his dog eyes. He thought to himself, fuck, why didn't those drifters kill you back then? How dare they talk about Lord Buttface? Chapter 40. Spiritual pets came to help. Yun Chuzhou caught a glimpse of Buttface's resentful eyes and said with a chuckle, Senior Brother Zhao, you're right. Buttface doesn't have any other abilities other than to relieve my boredom. He's simply trash. Buttface, Yun Chujio raised her eyebrows and looked at Butt-Face when she saw him glaring at her. Butt-Face immediately said eagerly, "Little fairy, you're really right when you say it like that. As long as what little fairy said is all right, wrong, right. I'd rather be a little trash by your side for the rest of my life." The corner of Yun Chujio's mouth twitched. In the future, if this Butt-Face wanted to pursue his wife, no spiritual pet would be able to escape. This guy was really too flexible. While everyone was chatting and laughing, Butt-Face stopped in his tracks. "Little fairy, there is an ambush about 5 miles ahead, and there are quite a number of people." Yun Chujio frowned and immediately said to everyone, "Turn around and run back, quickly." Although Li Zhuangji and the others felt that Yun Chujio was somewhat inexplicable, they did not have the time to think too much and immediately ran wildly with Yun Chujio. They did not run far before many people wearing black masks rushed out from the bushes on both sides of the road and chased closely behind. When Li Zhuangji and the others turned their heads and saw it, their heads buzzed. Junior sister Yun had really said it. There was actually someone who had set up an ambush to kill them. Yun Chujio calculated in her heart that there were more than 100 people chasing after them. If they fought head-on, they had no chance of winning. She might as well lure them to the sea. When the time came, they might have a chance of winning. Therefore, she brought Li Zhuangji and the others and ran toward the sea. However, Butt-Face quickly said, "Little fairy, there are many people coming from the front. I'm afraid that they have already made arrangements." Yun Chujio clenched her fists. That's right. Since they wanted to set up an ambush, they naturally had to think carefully. If they wanted to block them from the front and back, they could only run to the two sides. However, there were ambushes coming from the left and right sides from not far away, forming an encirclement. When Li Zhuangji and the others saw that there were 500 to 600 people encircling them, their faces turned pale. It was over. It was really over. These people wearing the black masks of the Divine Devil Hall were obviously people from the Divine Devil Hall. They didn't expect that they would actually dare to come out and hurt people under the massacre of the various major powers. They were truly arrogant to the extreme. The leader of the group, a man wearing a silver mask, didn't say anything. He only waved his hand at his subordinates, and everyone rushed towards Yun Chujio and the other three. Yun Chujio and the other three surrounded each other, and Yun Chujio immediately shouted, "Set up the sword formation." The 7 of them immediately set up the 7 stars sword formation and fought with their lives on the line. However, not to mention that they had not trained properly previously, even the 7 successive disciples were not a match for these hundreds of people. In a short while, other than Yun Chujio, the other 6 people had already died. Yun Chujio had no choice but to release all the spiritual pets in her spiritual beast bag. Now, she could only give it her all. Whether it was the other party, Li Zhuangji, or the others, they were all very shocked when they saw Yun Chujio's spiritual pets. These spiritual pets looked very ordinary, but they all had extraordinary abilities. Xiao Heinio, who was as fat as a ball, spat out extremely powerful flames. In an instant, the spiritual energy barrier of the other party was completely burned. The roars of the 4 half-tailed Xiaohong foxes had a seductive effect. If one was not careful, it would cause one's spiritual sense to be in a trance. The little black mouse could send a person flying with a single swipe of its claw. One could see how powerful it was. There was also that little bastard, that little mushroom, and that group of weird-looking rabbits. What surprised them the most was that spiritual pet that was like a kitten. Its movements were as fast as a phantom. Once it was scratched by its sharp claws, it would instantly tear a person apart. Chapter 40 20 Puppet. Everyone was surprised. What the hell were these things? Besides, how could one person have so many spiritual pets? Yun Chujio felt it was a pity. It would have been better if this place wasn't restricted to flying. She could still release those giant winged birds, but releasing them now would only be suicide. Even with the help of the spiritual pets, she had killed more than 100 enemies. However, the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Whether it was the spiritual pets or Yun Chujio and the others, they were already injured. They probably wouldn't be able to hold on for more than 10 minutes. But Face was extremely annoyed that he was only a good-for-nothing now. He reminded, "Little fairy, release the puppets." It wasn't that Yun Chujio didn't think of releasing the puppets before, but because of the self-destruction of puppet number 1, number 2, and number 3, she had a shadow in her heart. She was afraid that if she released puppet number 4 and puppet number 5, she would make the same mistake again. But now, she had no other choice. Yun Chujio immediately released puppet number 4 and puppet number 5. This time, everyone was shocked. They had never seen a puppet with intelligence. Where did this Yun Chujio come from? However, even so, Yun Chujio and the others still had no way to get rid of the enemy. The other party was obviously well prepared. They were afraid that something might go wrong, so they sent so many people to kill them. When the silver-masked man saw that Yun Chujio and the others were basically unable to fight back, he could not help but sneer. Although the process was a little off, the result was always good. None of these people could survive. Yun Chujio originally had another trump card, which was to awaken her strength under stimulation. However, she didn't know if it was because she wasn't stimulated too much. No matter how hard she stared, there were no signs of darkening. She was so anxious that she was about to hit the wall. Also, that little piece of trash, the Great Void Mirror, went into hibernation at the critical moment. It was simply a fucking useless thing. Could it be that she could only die here today? After Dog 2 limped and killed an enemy, it shouted, "Little fairy, don't you still have 3 puppets? Quickly take them out. Do you want to leave a cub behind?" Yun Chujio did not have the time to argue with Dog 2 now. She immediately took out the 3 puppets. If it was not for Dog 2's reminder, she would have forgotten about these 3 puppets. However, she felt that it was useless because these 3 puppets were made of ordinary fine iron. There was no way that they could be compared to puppet number 4 and puppet number 5. Their strength was inferior to theirs. As expected, the 3 puppets were soon covered in wounds. Yun Chujio and the others were surrounded by them. The silver-masked man sneered and said, "Yun Chujio, if you still have any abilities, just use them. None of you will survive today. When you die, your precious puppets and spiritual pets will be mine." Before Yun Chujio could reply, Li Zhuangji shouted in disbelief, "Martial Uncle Lu? You are Martial Uncle Lu? You actually defected to the Divine Devil Hall?" A trace of annoyance flashed across the silver-masked man's eyes. He originally did not intend to speak, but since the situation was good, he could not hold it in. Thinking of this, the silver-masked man sneered a few times, "What Martial Uncle Lu, Martial Uncle Zhang, all of you will die here today." Li Zhuangzi's gaze fell on the silver-masked man's right hand that was holding the sword. The small finger on it was missing a bit. He shook his head in disbelief again. "You don't have to deny it. You are Martial Uncle Lu. I don't understand. You usually have a good relationship with my father. Why did you want to kill me? Could it be that you really joined the Divine Devil Hall?" Chapter 40-21, The Puppet in the Sword Formation. The silver-masked man suddenly laughed gloomily. "Since you've recognized her, I'll let you be the one to understand. This is all an order from the elder. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not being able to kill Yun Chujio. If you had killed Yun Chujio on the sea, we naturally wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to come up with such a plan. You're really a good-for-nothing who cannot accomplish anything." Li Zhuangzi's face was filled with both shock and anger. He knew that the elder the silver-masked man was talking about was Elder Wan, because the silver-masked man and Manager Li were both under Elder Wan. He asked with bloodshot eyes, Aren't you afraid that my father will find out the truth?" The silver-masked man sneered, "So what if he finds out the truth? Do you think your father would dare to go against the elder? Besides, your father might go down to accompany you soon." Li Zhuangji angrily raised his sword and stabbed at the silver-masked man. The silver-masked man didn't dodge at all. Some of his men had already surrounded Li Zhuangji. If it weren't for Chen Bufan and the others who fought to the death, Li Zhuangji would have already been killed. The silver-masked man snorted contemptuously and said, "You have already learned the truth. Now go to hell." Yun Chujiu gritted her teeth. She felt that the anger in her body had begun to gather. All she needed was an opportunity to burst out. She was really worried to death. Just as Yun Chujiu felt that this time, the three puppets that were already riddled with injuries actually picked up the three treasured swords on the ground and said to the stunned Yun Chujiu, "Sword. Array." The voices of the three puppets were unclear. Yun Chujiu also guessed that they should be talking about the sword array. Yun Chujiu's face was filled with confusion. However, when she saw the position of the three puppets, her heart trembled and she did not hesitate anymore. She asked the puppets number 4, number 5, and Meng Yanshou to join in, and she took the position of the pivot. Zhao Hui and the others realized that Yun Chujiu and the puppets were using the 7 stars sword formation, and they were completely confused. Putting aside whether these puppets knew how to use the sword formation or not, even if they knew how to use it, so what? Didn't they not use the 7 stars sword formation before, but it was still useless? Of course, a few thoughts flashed through their minds. Those 3 puppets could actually speak. That seemingly useless rabbit actually knew how to use a sword. Of course, these thoughts were fleeting. This was because they and the other spiritual pets still had to deal with the enemies that kept charging at them, so they did not have the time to think about it. The silver-masked man and those people wearing black masks did not take the sword formation formed by Yun Chujiu and the puppets seriously. Wasn't it just the 7-star sword formation? What was so great about it? However, when the sword formation was activated, they were shocked to discover that it did not seem to be the 7 stars sword formation. This was because its power was several times stronger than the 7 stars sword formation. Not only did the power of the attack increase greatly, the main reason was that the defensive ability was too monstrous. There was actually not the slightest flaw that could be used to attack. The entire sword formation was like a malignant star that reaped the lives of people. In an instant, it had already killed dozens of people. This was also because the puppets did not know fatigue at all, and the nightmare beast and Yun Chujiu were both monstrous. The power of the sword formation was magnified several times. The Silver Man's original calm had also disappeared. At this time, half of their troops had already died. If this stalemate continued, they might really let these people escape. Therefore, he immediately commanded a portion of his men to surround and capture Li Zhuangji and the others. He planned to capture Li Zhuangji and the others as hostages so that he was not afraid that Yun Chujiu would not give in. Chapter 40-22. What were those things? Yun Chujiu was so smart that she immediately discovered the silver-masked man's intentions. She immediately commanded the sword formation to break out of the encirclement and protect Li Zhuangji and his spiritual pets. At this moment, Meng Yanshou's treasured sword broke due to excessive force. Yun Chujiu suddenly recalled her several immortal swords and immediately summoned them, handing them over to Meng Yanshou and the 5 puppets. It was rare for these immortal swords to come out for a breather. Naturally, they went all out, displaying the might of their immortal swords. With the immortal swords, the power of the 7 stars sword formation increased by a lot. Yun Chujiu immediately shouted at Li Zhuangji and the others, "Retreat to the seaside." Although Li Zhuangji and the others were worried about Yun Chujiu's safety, they knew that if they were caught by the other party, they would be in a passive position. Therefore, they retreated while fighting, retreating towards the seaside. The silver-masked man was so anxious that he clenched his teeth. Unfortunately, Yun Chujiu and the other 7 stars sword formation was really difficult to deal with, and it forcefully slowed down their footsteps. Finally, before Yun Chujiu was exhausted, everyone arrived at the seaside. The fishermen had long been scared away. They had low spiritual power, so how could they dare to get involved in such a thing? Li Zhuangji called out the big ship, and everyone boarded the big ship and quickly headed towards the deep sea. The silver-masked man was flustered and exasperated as he waved a few palms at the big ship that had gone far away. However, it was useless. They had thought that the ambush was foolproof and did not prepare the ship at all. Now, they could only watch as Yunchujio and the others escaped. "Sir, you don't have to be anxious. They can't keep floating on the sea. They will find a way to get ashore. When the time comes, we can kill them. Besides, we can use this time to dispatch ships and men. We can chase after them and kill them when the time comes," a subordinate said. The silver-masked man felt that what his subordinate said made sense. He could totally mobilize his men and ships to chase after them. Because there were high-level demon beasts in the deep sea, Yunchujio and the others had nowhere to run. As it was forbidden to use talismans here, he immediately sent his men to mobilize his men. However, he felt a little uneasy. He had lost hundreds of men this time. If he still couldn't kill Yunchujio in the end, Elder Wan might not spare him. Therefore, Yunchujio must die. 2 days later, another 300 people rushed over with ships. The subordinate who had delivered the letter earlier said to the silver-masked man with some apprehension, "Sir, the higher-ups said that if you can't kill Yunchujio this time, you don't need to return to the sect." The silver-masked man gritted his teeth. He had long expected Elder Wan to be furious. Fortunately, he had enough confidence that he could kill Yunchujio. Immediately, everyone split into 3 large ships and chased after Yunchujio and the others. 2 days later, someone exclaimed, "Look, isn't that Yunchujio's ship in front of us?" "Ha, they're dead meat this time." The silver-masked man sneered. "Let's see where you can run to this time." Just as he was thinking, he heard Yunchujio's clear voice coming from the opposite ship, "Hey, that unspeakable thing. I'm warning you, either get lost or die. Choose." The silver-masked man was so angry that he gritted his teeth. What did she mean by shameful thing? At this time, this stupid girl still refused to admit it. She was really courting death. Immediately, the silver-masked man commanded the 3 large ships to move forward at full speed. This time, they had no way to escape. However, at this moment, a subordinate shouted in horror, "Then, what are those things?" The silver-masked man looked in the direction of the voice and saw many black dorsal fins suddenly appearing in the seawater in all directions. Chapter 40 23 Shark attack. The silver-masked man's face immediately turned pale. "Yes, it's a level 64 bloodthirsty iron-skinned shark. Why are there so many level 64 bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks gathered here? Retreat, retreat now." The silver-masked man couldn't care less about Yunchujio and the others now. Besides, there were so many level 64 bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks, Yunchujio and the others had no way to survive. However, he soon realized that he was wrong. That was because he heard Yunchujio shouting clearly, "Little guys, go. Eat them." Following Yunchujio's voice, those level 64 bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks actually swam towards their 3 ships. Yunchujio could actually command a group of sharks. How was this possible? As the blood tree had just been destroyed, the sea beasts had not returned from the deep sea, so the sharks could only eat half their fill for the past few days. Now that they saw the silver-masked man and the others, they naturally cried out in excitement. Yunchujio stood on the big ship and commanded the sharks, "Single Eye, knock their ship over first. When they fall into the water, they will be at your mercy." When the Single Eye sharks heard the name Single Eye, they could not help but freeze. However, they still followed Yunchujio's instructions and ordered the sharks to crash into the 3 big ships. Although the silver-masked man and the others were not bad on land, how could they be a match for the bloodthirsty iron-skinned sharks in the sea? Soon, the 3 big ships were overturned into the sea. The sharks swarmed up, and in a moment, the sea surface was dyed red with blood. Even though the silver-masked man and the others were enemies, Li Zhuangji and the others still felt goosebumps when they saw this bloody scene. They couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. If junior sister Tianyun hadn't persuaded the sharks a few days ago, They would probably have ended up like this. The silver-masked man struggled in the water. He simply regretted it. If he had known that Yun Chujo could command the sharks, he would have set up an ambush by the sea. Sooner or later, he would have killed them. It was too late to regret now. The silver-masked man and the others were not good at fighting in the water. In addition to the large number of sharks, they were all dead after 2 hours. Compared to the shock of Li Zhuangji and the others, Yun Chujia's expression was very calm. In this world, the strong preyed on the weak. This was nothing out of the ordinary. After Yun Chujo greeted the one-eyed shark, she returned. We have to hurry. If Elder Wan finds out that there's still no news from the group of people he sent, he might send more people over. We have to pass through that no-fly zone as soon as possible, Yun Chujo said solemnly. Li Zhuangji and the others were now obedient to Yun Chujia's words, so they naturally had no objections. Moreover, they had learned their lesson. Even though they were very curious about Yun Chujia's many secrets, they were tactful and did not ask about it. Yun Chujo also pretended that nothing had happened because she had already calculated that when they were about to reach the sect, she would let the Meng Yanshou weave a dream for them and push the blame onto Shui Wuji and Enfeng. Anyway, it was not like she had not saved her before. However, when she thought of the 3 newly made puppets, she was very suspicious. How could these 3 puppets have modified the 7-star sword formation? Could it be that they learned it when they saw the drifters fooling around in the sword pool? This was also possible. After all, puppet number 4 and puppet number 5 could also use it according to the rules after they had seen it a few times. There was no choice. She was smart, so the puppets that were separated from her divine sense were naturally very smart. Chapter 40-24. Although Yun Chujo couldn't wait to take out the 3 puppets and ask them about it, due to Zhao Hui and the others, she just needed to endure it for a while and prepare to study it after she returned to the sect. The group arrived at the beach at the fastest speed, and then they passed through the no-fly zone without stopping. When they boarded the flying spirit tool, they finally let out a sigh of relief. Moreover, Yun Chujo was extra cautious. She did not ride on the flying spirit tool with the sect's logo, but on an ordinary flying spirit tool. This guy's carefulness helped them to avoid another wave of ambush because Elder One was fully prepared this time. He even prepared a group of people along the way to prevent Yun Chujo and the others from escaping. However, they didn't expect that Yun Chujo and the others didn't ride on the flying spirit tool with the sect's mark, so they let Yun Chujo and the others pass through the ambush area. They were about to reach the sect. Li Zhuangji gnashed his teeth and said, "My father has always been loyal to Elder Wan. I didn't expect him to send people to kill us. This is outrageous. When we return to the sect, I will make my father report to the sect leader to punish Elder Wan for murdering his fellow disciples." Yun Chujo looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. "Do you think it will work? We were almost bitten to death by the King of Fire's spiritual beasts back then. In the end, didn't we just let it go? Not to mention that Lu Zhong is already dead. Even if we bring him to the sect leader, Elder Wan will remove himself completely. His henchmen will even bite back and say that we are slandering him." Li Zhuangji clenched his fist. "I don't believe it. Don't tell me that the testimony of so many of us is still not credible." Yun Chujo sneered. "So what if we have so many people?" Back then, as the sect leader's personal disciple, didn't Marshal Uncle Zhang also have to suffer an unjustified injustice? Without sufficient strength, even the most conclusive evidence would be wiped out. Where do you think those people who robbed and killed us came from? It was obvious that it was a force that Elder One had privately nurtured. If he had such a large force outside the sect, wouldn't he be able to cover the sky within the sect? Do you think that the sect leader would fall out with Elder Wan because of us little shrimps? Every time Yun Chujo said this, Li Zhuangzi's face turned paler. Then what should we do? Don't tell me that we can only swallow this. Don't make any moves and take things slowly. We insist that we have been ambushed by the Divine Devil Hall, so all the plans that he had prepared have fallen through. Then, we will let your father and Elder One continue to feign civility with each other. Elder One can't get to the bottom of it for the time being, so he won't make any moves for the time being. We will think of a way to erode his power, and the final attack will hit. Yun Chuzhou said slowly. Zhao Hui reminded her from the side, junior sister Yun, when Lu Zhong attacked us on the sea, the number of people increased by hundreds. He probably sent people from other places. Maybe Elder One already knows that we've exposed Lu Zhong's identity. Why would he believe our story? Yun Chuzhou smiled lightly and said, I didn't want him to believe it at first. I just wanted him to wander around and buy time for us. Manager Li had followed Elder Wan for many years and knew a lot about him. Then, he would think of a way to join hands with the sect leader. In time, he would definitely be able to uproot Elder Wan's power. Zhao Hu's mind was flexible and he understood Yun Chujia's meaning. As for Li Zhuangji and the others, they were all confused. Fortunately, they now firmly believed in Yun Chuzhou and immediately nodded in agreement. Chapter 40-25, Self-Confession. When they were about to reach the sect, Yun Chuzhou secretly knocked Zhao Hui and the others unconscious. Then, she had the nightmare beast weave a dream for them, making them think that they had been saved by Shui Wuji and Enfeng. After Zhao Hui and the others woke up, Yun Chuzhou strengthened the story again. Although the six of them felt that something was strange, they still accepted the dream that Meng Yanshou had woven for them. Finally, the flying spirit tool arrived outside the Nameless Sword Sect's mountain gate. When the crowd saw the Nameless Sword Sect's plaque, their eyes suddenly heated up. They had finally returned. The 7 of them did not go to the bounty hall. Instead, they went straight to the meeting hall. They did not expect to meet Elder One who had rushed over. Li Zuangzi's body suddenly tensed up. Yun Chuzhou glared at him before he lowered his head and suppressed his anger. When Elder Wan learned that Yun Chuzhou and the other 3 had returned to the sect, he was both shocked and angry. Only then did he rush to the meeting hall. He swept a warning glance at the 7 of them before walking into the meeting hall. Yun Chuzhou and the other 3 could not enter directly. Instead, they could only enter after being informed by the disciples. After obtaining permission, Yun Chuzhou and the other 3 entered the meeting hall. Master Ouyang asked with some confusion, "You said that you have something to report. What is it?" Zhao Hui and the others did not say anything. This kind of work that required eloquence naturally had to be handed over to Yun Chuzhou. Yun Chuzhou said with an expression of lingering fear, "Master, we were ambushed on the way back from completing our mission. Moreover, the other party clearly had a premeditated plan. If it wasn't for our great fortune, we would have died hundreds of times." The most infuriating thing was that the mastermind was actually, Yun Chuzhou looked at Elder Wan as she said this. Elder Wan was already prepared. He snorted coldly, "Yun Chuzhou, you have to pay attention to the evidence when you speak. What right do you have to say that I sent people to kill you?" Yun Chuzhou looked at him in shock and said, "Elder Wan, I didn't say that you were the mastermind. Why are you in such a hurry to deny it? Could it really be you who did it?" Elder Wan gritted his teeth in frustration. He was too surprised that Yun Chuzhou and the others had returned safely, so he was a little flustered. What was the difference between this and admitting it without beating them up? However, this stupid girl had underestimated him. No matter how glib her tongue was, even if he refused to admit it, she would not be able to shake his position. Just as he was about to defend himself, he heard Yun Chuzhou say, "I did not expect the mastermind to be the Divine Devil Hall. They sent hundreds of people to kill us. If it was not for my fiancé's men who arrived, we would not have survived." Elder Wan did not expect Yun Chuzhou to say that. He even suspected that the information he received was fake. Could it be that Yun Chuzhou and the others did not discover Lu Zhong's identity? Lu Zhong had lied to him. Elder Wan was shocked and uncertain for a moment, so he did not interrupt. He listened to Yun Chujia's vivid narration of what happened. Master Ouyang had been through a lot. After seeing Elder Wan's previous performance, he had some doubts about Yun Chuji's words. However, he did not say it out loud. He just followed Yun Chuji's words and asked for some details. Then, he said that he would inform the other forces about this matter and work together to find clues about the Divine Devil Hall. Finally, Master Ouyang waved his hand, indicating that Yun Chujio and the others could leave. Yun Chujio and the others immediately left the meeting hall and went to the bounty hall to hand in their tasks. Chapter 40-26. A puppet showing off. After handing in the mission, they went to a quiet place. Yun Chujio then said to Li Zhuangji, "Go back and tell your father the truth. I believe he will know what to do. Also, don't tell outsiders about the Blood Sand Island. Otherwise, there will be more trouble." Everyone hurriedly nodded and then dispersed. Yun Chujio strolled back to her courtyard. She thought that she would see the drifters when she opened the door, but she didn't expect to see nothing. Yun Chujio curled her lips and thought that the drifters probably knew that she wasn't here, so they didn't come to cause trouble. Yun Chujio took a shower and then went into the courtyard. She released the puppets number 6, number 7, and number 8 and was ready to ask them about the sword formation. However, the moment she released the 3 puppets seemed to have gone mad and were running around in the courtyard. They even went to the swing to play on it. Yun Chujio, were the 3 puppets crazy? Yun Chujio quickly used her spiritual sense to order them to come back. However, it was useless. Puppet number 6 even shook its butt as if it was showing off to Yun Chujio. It almost angered He Xinjiu to death. Was this a rebellion? Yun Chujio immediately stood up from the stone bench and walked toward puppet number 6, who was showing off with a gloomy face. However, in the next moment, she was stunned to see the 3 puppets minding their own business. She took out their puppet discs from the drive shell and released wisps of red mist from the puppet discs to wrap around the 3 puppet discs and run away. Yes, run away. Yun Chujio was instantly petrified. After a while, she gritted her teeth and said, "What the fuck is going on?" She recalled the incident where the 3 puppets knew how to use the sword formation. It was probably the doing of those drifters. However, she had to admit that those drifters had saved her life. Thinking about it, she could spare them for now. After all, there was still a long time ahead and she had plenty of time to deal with them. Yun Chujio comforted herself. The main reason was that the drifters' headquarters were in the sword pool. Even if she wanted to settle the score with them, she couldn't do anything about it. Just as she was thinking about it, the drifters hopped in again. However, the 3 puppet discs were missing. They had probably been sent back to the sword pool. Yun Chujio couldn't be bothered with them and allowed them to hop on the swing. She sorted out what had happened recently. She didn't know the origin of the blood tree, but the death of such an evil thing was naturally a good thing. If Manager Li knew that Elder One had robbed and killed Li Zhuangji, he would definitely join Master Ouyang. Sooner or later, Master Ouyang and Elder One would fight each other. Only by getting rid of Elder One could she feel at ease. However, as there were too many implications involved, she was afraid that they would not be able to come to blows for a while. Moreover, Elder One would definitely have other tricks up his sleeve. It was better for her to be more careful. After a few days, the bounty hall had another mission. This time, it was a mission to hammer the sword billet. Yun Chujio was not surprised by this. When she was selecting inner disciples, she had heard of this new rule. That was that inner disciples had to help hammer the sword billet at irregular intervals, and they were not allowed to refuse. However, Yun Chujio had never expected that she would be assigned to the number 1 sword forging hall of the upper house. Wasn't that Elder Duemis sword forging hall? Logically speaking, the status of the sword forging hall of the upper house was extraordinary. Why would an amateur like her be assigned to help hammer the sword blanks? Although Elder Duanmu had performed well in the last inner disciple selection, she had heard that he had a good personal relationship with Elder Wan. There couldn't be any conspiracy, right? Chapter 40-27, New Mission. Just as Yun Chujio was feeling a little surprised, Li Zhuangji arrived. Ever since he returned from the Blood Sand Island, Li Zhuangji often came over to give Yun Chuzhou some spirit fruits and food. He almost shocked the other disciples. Didn't Li Zhuangji have a bad relationship with Yun Chuzhou previously? He even caused a ruckus in the discipline hall. Why was he so attentive now? How would they know that Li Zhuangji was paying off his debt? Every time he sent some spirit fruits, Yun Chuzhou would deduct some spirit stones from his loan slip. It wasn't easy for him either. Yun Chuzhou saw him coming over and asked, "Is Elder Duanmu one of Elder Wan's people?" Li Zhuangji shook his head. "I heard from my father that although the two of them have a good relationship, Elder Duanmu's mind is on forging the sword. Therefore, he doesn't participate in the fight between the sect leader and Elder Wan." Yun Chuzhou nodded. If that was the case, even if there was something fishy going on, Elder Duanmu would probably be kept in the dark. No matter what, since the mission had to be completed, she would go and take a look. Therefore, early the next morning, Yun Chuzhou strolled to the No. 1 sword forging hall of the upper house. This sword forging hall was much more imposing than Hall Master Zhuge's sword forging hall. There were even disciples guarding the door. The Prime Minister's former third-grade official. Although the two disciples guarding the door were also inner disciples, their eyes were almost fixed on their foreheads. They were very arrogant. After Yun Chuzhou explained the purpose of her visit, the two of them curled their lips. "A half-baked person like you was actually sent to our upper house's sword forging hall? Isn't that ridiculous?" Although the two of them said so, one of them still went in to pass the message. A moment later, that person said with some schadenfreude, "Elder Duanmu said to let you go in through the back door and then go to the backyard to clean the sword. If you do it well, you will be considered to have completed the task." That person thought that Yun Chuzhou would be extremely embarrassed and angry after hearing that and would even argue with them. Who would have thought that Yun Chuzhou would immediately go to the back door with a smile and humming a song? What a joke. She was not stupid. It was much easier to clean a treasured sword than to hammer a sword billet. Only a fool would choose to hammer a sword billet. As for why Elder Duanmu did not allow her to hammer a sword billet, it was probably because of the old feudalism. He felt that women should not go near the weapon refining furnace. When Yun Chuzhou reached the back door, the disciple guarding the door had obviously received the notice. He did not ask any more questions and directly let Yun Chuzhou into the sword forging hall's backyard. Yun Chuzhou looked around and saw that although this was only the sword forging hall's backyard, it was very spacious and exquisite. There was even a rockery. Yun Chuzhou thought to herself, as expected of the sword forging hall of the upper house. It was indeed high-end and high-class. When she was looking around, she heard a cough. She looked up and saw Elder Duanmu looking at her with a straight face. Yun Chuzhou bowed with a smile. "Greetings, Elder Duanmu. I'm here to do a mission." Elder Duanmu nodded coldly. "Logically speaking, you should be assigned to the sword forging hall in the lower or middle court. Perhaps something went wrong with the bounty hall, which is why you were assigned to me. However, since you're here, I won't make things difficult for you. Wipe the treasure sword in the storeroom. When the sun sets, you can go back." Yun Chuzhou hurriedly said, "I understand. I promise to fulfill my duties." Elder Duanmu's expression was still very cold. He asked a disciple behind him to tell Yun Chuzhou what to do, then turned around and went to the front yard. "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.